Huge day in the world of cybersecurity, friends. The FBI got hacked. Not only did they get hacked, literally in the last couple days, but it seems like the Epstein files out of the FBI were hacked. 100 terabytes were actually gone out of nowhere, and they basically look like complete idiots in the process. So to basically start off with today, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over, so I'm going to start off with a little bit of front loading to sort of get you up to the context. Now, in the last couple days, the FBI confirmed that there was a cybersecurity incident targeting a sensitive internal network that managed wiretapping operations and foreign intelligence service warrants. So basically, for anybody that doesn't know, the FBI is sort of the chief cybersecurity, sort of defense, I would say the offense in the country. But the thing about the FBI is they also do a lot of surveillance. So for anybody that doesn't know, the FBI started off basically building programs like Carnivore, for instance, where they went to the internet service providers, they went to the people that control the backbone of the internet, installed surveillance software, and in certain cases were able to monitor and capture, at the time, megabytes, hundreds of thousands of megabytes of information. Things like emails, and then they could actually filter through these emails and see exactly what people were sending from point A to point B. Now, obviously, the FBI evolved even further than that. The FBI had programs like Magic Lantern, which for anybody that doesn't know what Magic Lantern is, it was basically the FBI creating a keylogger, a piece of software that would exist on your computer. So if you typed in an email, a password, whatever, the FBI would have your keystrokes and be able to see what the hell you were doing. So would this be used on a mafia boss? Would this be used on a terrorist, a drug trafficker, a human trafficker? Probably. But it also could have been just used on pretty much anybody the FBI really felt like, because I don't think that any of these agencies follow everything down to a T. But that's a whole different story. For anybody that doesn't know, the FBI confirmed that they actually had suspicious activities, and they basically responded in every way. They didn't give details on how much information was accessed or whether actual investigations were compromised. But they did actually put the blame on one organization known as Salt Typhoon, something that we've talked about in the past before. Now, I've talked about this for years. They're basically an organization that has come since 2020, the height of COVID. They're basically the Chinese government. And what the Chinese government did is they got some of their best hackers to not hack the FBI, but actually they hacked the people the FBI trusts the most. So the FBI, in order to surveil the internet, anytime they get like sort of a wiretap, they have to basically grab data from the internet service provider. So when you're in the United States of America, you typically have all of these options to pick. You can get your internet from Verizon, you can get your internet from AT&T, Spectrum, Cricket, whatever. Basically, at the end of the day, the FBI will go to any of these internet service providers, and because they are trusted, the information that is sent back and forth is something that the FBI uses. The FBI has a special connection to these people, so they can just move data off, they can grab people's information, provided they have a fucking warrant. So basically what the Chinese hackers did in this case was they leveraged that trust, and they actually used the connection at the internet service provider by hacking the internet service provider and then pilfering through the FBI's surveillance network. Now, from a good write-up at securityboulevard.com, they actually said that apparently the information that was grabbed was not necessarily the actual, intercepted communication, the warranted material. That would be in something known as Digital Storm. But what they actually got was something known as DCS 3000 or Red Hook, which allowed them to grab warrant information and the personally identifiable information of individuals under investigation, along with the metadata used to map communication patterns during criminal and national security probes. So again, very, very important information that shouldn't have ended up in, criminal hands. If the FBI decided to just turn off the switch, they would basically be ending their entire surveillance system. So you have to treat this stuff with a little bit of a gingerly care, and you have to make sure you don't destroy your whole surveillance network, and you're just basically closing up the leaks that exist. So obviously Salt Typhoon did this, and for anybody that's been looking into Salt Typhoon, the last few years they've been on a tear trying to go through every sort of telecom network out there. It really is some actual scary shit. It's one of the reasons why I say, like, I'm not I don't really care if the government is tracking me, but I know the tools that the government is using to track me can be exploited by another country, another hacker, and so on and so forth. It's a fucked up thing. The FBI got hacked, and you might be like, well, where do we go from here? Not really anywhere, to be honest with you. If the FBI is getting blitzed, then we're pretty much just suffering in the process. And you know that this hack is pretty serious when you've got the White House and the National Security Agency that have jumped in to basically analyze this together. It is a sophisticated hack. And again, while they kind of blame and put the eye line towards basically China at this point, when you say nation state, you're basically saying it was China that was attacking us. And at this point in time, obviously it's something that worries the FBI, I imagine. It worries the US government, because what kind of information could they have gotten through the FBI's vast surveillance network is kind of anybody's guess until and after this investigation is done. But they say that the affected systems were unclassified and contained law enforcement sensitive information, including returns from the legal process, such as a pen register and trap and trace surveillance returns, and personally identifiable information pertaining to subjects of FBI investigations. So people that necessarily aren't even guilty, they're just people that are being investigated by the FBI. And again, the FBI could really just investigate whoever they can convince a judge to get a warrant on, and God knows do what with. It's crazy stuff. And the only reason that we're blaming this again on the Chinese is that the method used to attack the internet service provider of the telecom industry bared a lot of similarities to Salt Typhoon. So again, the kind of hack that you're seeing over here is not something that the average person is doing. It's what somebody's doing when they have unlimited resources, really, really good raw talent, and of course, even if they're caught, they never have the chance of being extradited, because good luck extraditing somebody from the Chinese Communist Party to the United States. They're going to tell you to get bent, and we would have said it too, vice versa, if the shoes were on the other foot. Now, here's where the story also gets even more interesting. So this is one hack. There was actually another hack that sort of got reported today, where apparently the FBI had an actual breach when it came to the Epstein files. So a hacker back in 2023 compromised the files held by the FBI. And actually, you can verify this kind of for yourself too. So I go to the Epstein files over here, and typically in EFTA 001-48259.pdf, you can see that this is a group of individual special agents that were involved with, again, investigating into the Epstein files. For instance, one of the names that wasn't actually blocked off here was Aaron Spivak. Now, Aaron Spivak is an individual that actually was brought into great scrutiny because apparently his actions led to an FBI server being hacked. And unfortunately, a hacker accessed these FBI files and actually saw some of the CSAM that they had captured and stored in the Epstein files. Now, while the FBI says, listen, it's a cyber incident, it's an isolated one, and they restricted access to the malicious actor and rectified the network. So, yeah, actually the FBI, and that's all you really can say when you get hacked. That's pretty much the only thing you can bring up. Now inside here, I have EFTA 00173569, which actually is a statement. So if you actually scroll up all the way here, this is Aaron Spivak actually having his statement given about what had actually happened. So for instance, he understands this is an internal investigation regarding an allegation that Special Agent Spivak improperly stored digital evidence at his residence. So not something that you should be doing, especially when you're working with, something as dangerous, something as sensitive as CSAM material, obviously. One of the things that I've talked to with people who actually investigate this for a living is that in most cases, when it comes to these big mega CSAM databases, a lot of these guys just store hashes. They don't even store the images. Actually, seeing the images is something that very few people who work in these organizations actually, have the unfortunate, horrors of actually seeing. But in cases like this, when you have something as sensitive, you shouldn't be leaving it unsecured and accessible by people outside the FBI network, okay? Jesus Christ. So here he kind of explains what had actually happened to an extent and how the systems were hacked. So I'm going to read this through and I'm going to explain exactly what's going on. So one of the remote computing was enforced, the use of it, right? And this was probably brought after things like COVID. A few years ago, when he attended training provided by the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists, during which we went through basic computer forensics, I heard about law enforcement use of remote desktop protocol. Now, RDP is a framework that we use to remotely access a computer. Remember that Winboat video I made where you could run, Windows applications underneath Linux and it would look like it was native, like the actual Windows popped up? A lot of those windows popped up because RDP was used to pass through the virtual machines interface to the computer. So you could remotely access a computer, and in that case, make it look as if it was kind of almost native. So anyways, RDP was being used in the Bureau, but he was not sure for what purposes on what devices. He spoke with several others in the FBI about RDP, and again, they mentioned he had either been using it or toyed around with the idea. One of the individuals mentioned to me that setting it up using it was fairly easy, and that all I needed to do was follow Microsoft's directions, as they were pretty easy to follow. So again, Microsoft brought up the instructions to set up RDP, and he's like, shit, I guess I'll go with it, right? So anyways, he attempted to access the C20 computer lab through RDP. I believe the lab security prevented me from remoting in. Probably because of firewall, or obviously because you had to VPN into the network in order to do anything, just because you had to have secure tunneling, and we'll get to that in a second. He had no idea that in doing so, he had opened the lab's RDP port, and that it had worked. I could access the port from in the lab, but once outside the lab, I was unable to gain access to the network. I thought the security was doing what it was supposed to. I was later advised that the RDP configuration was mostly correct and that I was a step or two away from setting it up successfully and securely. So basically, he almost had it right, except the one step he needed basically allowed that computer at the FBI to be accessed from the outside. So I believe enabling remote access was a good initiative, but it wasn't executed properly. Now, the reason he made a remote thing for this was that in case something had crashed to the office and he was at home, he could just dial in through the RDP, reset some things, start the process again. So obviously, I would say noble intentions, but horrible fucking execution. My heart and mind were in the right place, but I lacked the knowledge for networking and was not a system administrator. Yet I was tasked with setting up a network I did not know how to set up. And despite repeated requests for help, I was denied. I should not be held accountable for the FBI's systemic failure, especially when the FBI encouraged me and approved me to enhance our lab. So basically, he's saying, listen, I'm not a systems guy. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing with a network. The FBI tells me to do this. I asked the FBI for help. And you know what? I'm going to be on his side here. There's no reason the FBI shouldn't have somebody that would have helped him out doing this. When you're working with something as sensitive as this, you shouldn't be fucking up this royally. And no matter who the administration is, the FBI should, in theory, be an independent part of the DOJ. They should always have some level of competency. So this was probably around the time during the Biden era, and nobody was questioning this shit even then. So again, no matter what side you're on, the FBI did, at least according to this, have a pretty systemic failure. So he says that at 7:30 he arrives at the office and he notices Tolino computer was restarted. For anybody that doesn't know what Tolino is, Tolino computers kind of are for instance, these little servers. These are forensic systems, and a lot of these guys typically will have these forensic software suites. It's like Paladin, for instance, where they dial in with a live Linux environment, and of course they then do their forensics work through this. So according to this, obviously the people who are doing any of the stuff at the FBI are not technically illiterate. They know what they're doing, but again, just because you know how to do computer forensics also doesn't mean you know how to do network security, right? They're two almost separate fields in this case. But anyways, let's go down over here, and you can see that at 7:40 he plugs in his Tolino, a text file pops up and said, in part, my network has been compromised, and provided an email address to contact. The file was in the startup folder, so when logging in, it opened automatically. Ran my computer antivirus software, which is up to date and active, and it identified one potential threat. So basically, a few hours later, they located the log files and began combing through, and they noticed strange IP activity that took place yesterday from two IP addresses. The activity included combing through certain files pertaining to the Epstein investigation. I reached out to one of the case agents to see if they were in the office, thinking that maybe they inadvertently changed a setting on a NAS or if they noticed anything strange about them. Then they dove into the IPs and checked all of our computers to see which had the IPs in question. One computer, our discovery computer, matched one of them and is located in the room next to the lab. Now, obviously, what's really interesting about this too is when you dive into what had happened afterwards, right? So what did the hacker actually see? So for instance, they don't actually tell, the FBI doesn't actually tell us what the hacker saw, what the hacker downloaded, what the hacker did. But what we do know is about 100 terabytes of information has seemed to disappear. And you can see Spivak actually say 500 terabytes of data was gone because of the result of the intrusion. I was able to recover 400 terabytes of that data. However, I was told to Google how to recover the data. No one else tried to help us. So immediately I'm kind of looking at this and I'm wondering, wait a minute. What? You had 500 terabytes gone. He was able to remove 400, but 100 terabytes are gone, which, by the way, is a huge amount of information. Imagine 100 terabytes. 100 people don't even have like a fraction of that in their computers locally. 100 terabytes being gone is some pretty huge information to see over here. And of course, when I see that no one tried to help us, it makes me wonder almost that had this been some sort of inside job, had this been something that was abused by another interest in the FBI? Like, what the fuck is happening anymore? You know, you would think that this kind of shit would happen at like some third tier like country or whatever, where like maybe their intelligence services isn't as good. But I mean, this is the goddamn Federal Bureau of Investigation, man. Like, what's going on? Where it also gets even dumber over here, ladies and gentlemen, is what had actually been reported by Reuters in this case. So basically, while Spivak said that he was a scapegoat for the intrusion, and almost reading his statement, I kind of agree if again, he wasn't being helped at all. The person familiar with the breach said the intrusion was carried out by a foreign hacker who did not appear to realize that they had penetrated a law enforcement server. So basically, according to this, a hacker breaks into the FBI servers. They don't even know they're in the FBI servers, right? Now, according to this, they express disgust at the presence of child abuse images on the device. So they break into a server, they see all of this CSAM material, and they're like, oh my God, this is completely nasty. They leave a note on the server and they say, listen, I'm going to turn you over to the FBI. So the FBI is like, wait a minute, we're about to get a call about us. So then the FBI diffused the situation by convincing the hacker that they were actually the FBI. They had the hacker join a Zoom call, I believe, where they flashed their badge in front of a webcam. I mean, you can't make this shit up, man. Like, they left an unsecure server full of probably some of the most sensitive materials out there. Some guy breaks in and he's like, oh my God, this is filthy and nasty. Leaves a note and the FBI is like, wait a minute, hold on. Buddy, get in. We're the feds. Here's my badge. I mean, what are you, fucking 5? Like, come on, man. Like, Jesus Christ. So, of course, nobody knows, like, obviously in the reporting, who the hacker was, what country they were operating from, or even really what they accessed. But it makes me wonder, too, is, like, if the hacker has gotten into it, what else isn't the FBI telling us, right? Like, who else also didn't pilfer through the system and get access to information that we thought would have been locked down, tighter than a drill sergeant's asshole in some cases, right? I mean, it's insane to see how far the story has gone. But at least we can confirm in this case that, yes, the FBI seems to have had its Epstein files hacked. There probably could be a situation, again, the FBI hasn't exactly explained every single detail of it. We don't know if anything in this network was sort of grabbed, downloaded, or, and again, this information is pretty germane to even other intelligence agencies, right? Like, I can imagine, the Chinese government, the Russians, people looking through these documents, hoping to find something that they can use as blackmail or use something as leverage against a U.S. high-ranking politician, a U.S. serviceman, a woman, whatever you want to call it. Anybody. I can imagine this information would be very useful to anybody that isn't just a citizen hacker. So again, to see the FBI do such a blunder here, not just in their surveillance and wiretapping systems, but also storing some of the most valuable investigative files that they probably could have had, really makes me question how good the agency actually is, you know? Like, it's crazy. You know, 5, 6 years ago, I used to be like, man, the FBI is like the fucking cream of the crop when it comes to this. And now it seems like everybody that is running the FBI, top to bottom, is just a complete fucking goober. And they probably shouldn't be trusted with something so sensitive and serious. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of technical stuff to look through over here, but I'm glad that we have these files. I'm glad that we can read through this stuff because there's just so much information. And that's why, you know, when I make these videos, they get longer. I go into the weeds because I feel like if you're going to watch these videos, I want every single one of my videos to have something meaningful, something that you can share, something that will be evergreen, something that you can learn from. And I think that happened in today's video, right? We all learned how terrible the FBI is, and we all know that these Epstein files have been accessed, and in some cases, a lot of information seems to have been removed. Now, again, some of that information can also have been for other investigations, but it is genuinely something worth going into. And it's also something worth bringing up. But given the lack of justice on the American side for the Epstein files, I don't even think the FBI will be held up to task. I think in order for anything to happen, a regime change needs to occur, like some other party needs to come into power, other people need to come into power that start, you know, really putting the hammer down on some of the people that have let this shit fester for so long. Remember, this is cross-administration. Whether you're from the Biden era, the Trump era, this is a fuck-up on every angle. So remember that going forward, okay? But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.